shoe fits, put it on, lace it up, and walk a mile in that bitch. Hey yo, I'm shooting from the hip, that means I come well equipped. You trying to find a remedy for all the illness I spit. Well, nothing's gonna do it, son, this is as real as it gets. The dopeness is so potent, I suggest that you take a rest. I got something on my chest, and I really must confess my one and only mission is like.
What's up, guys? It's Earl here, your angsty dad. Thank you for tuning in to Out of the Wild, the Angsty Dad in America podcast. I'm really happy to be talking to you this afternoon. As I speak, we're getting a little bit of the hurricane hitting us here in South Carolina. I might lose power, so this might be presented in pieces. But today I got something important to talk about. I call this episode The Problem of Whiteness. And I want to talk about what that means to me as it relates to our current society and a historical perspective. So bear with me. And if you feel a little uncomfortable listening to this episode, you're supposed to. It wasn't comfortable for me to write about or research about, or it's not really comfortable to talk about, honestly, but it's a reality. And I started this podcast so I can speak my truths, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. So this is me doing that. Not very long ago, it seemed that the USA was on a course toward progress. For many, the future was bright and full of promise for everyone. People were able to marry who they pleased. The economy was rebounding. Ownership of houses and cars was up. Employment was improving for everybody. We had our first biracial president. And though he was hated by many, at the time it seemed impossible that we could possibly go backwards. And yet, here we are. Brett Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault. He was said to be a bit of a drinker.
I drank beer with my friends. Almost everyone did. Sometimes I had too many beers. Sometimes others did. I liked beer. I still like beer. But I did not drink beer to the point of blacking out, and I never sexually assaulted anyone.
Though he misrepresented himself, according to the people who knew him. Whilst under oath, he and his accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, took a seat before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Dr. Ford was upset, but calmly recounted the traumatizing experience as best as she could. Kavanaugh was an angry, crying, hyper-partisan mess. He led off his defense by accusing the left of orchestrating a revenge play against him because of his work with Ken Starr against investigating Bill Clinton in the 90s. And as you know, an FBI investigation, quote-unquote, was ordered. It was completed in 4 days. Numerous people who claimed to have had information, they were ignored by the FBI, and by the slimmest margin in 140 years, Kavanaugh is now a Supreme Court justice, tilting the court firmly to the right. Not that it hasn't always been pretty conservative, but that's a whole nother story. The president, Donald Trump, has made countless infractions against decency, custom, kindness, and humanity. Russian meddling notwithstanding. As we know, he's called Mexicans rapists, Muslims terrorists. He's had multiple suggestions that he would sleep with his own daughter, his marital infidelity. He dehumanizes his perceived enemies. He weaponizes fear in general. He taunts victims whose plight don't fit his narrative, most recently Dr. Ford herself.
Shouldn't happen to him. What he's going through, 36 years ago, this happened. I had one beer, right? I had one beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember.
And sure, people of all stripes are pissed, and rightfully so. Trump's mere existence has become more than an agitation to the status quo, but a sharp turn on the road that is human and specifically American history. What am I getting at? Let's jump back a little further. Let's see if I can clear this up a little. You see, we don't like to admit it, but it's glossed over in the best schools and high schools, and it's not even mentioned in the worst. But America was founded on bloody, bloody conquest. In schools, they trace America's history back to the Mayflower Pact, signed by European-born pilgrims that arrived in what became North America, United States of America, on Plymouth Rock.
Our forefathers weren't the pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
The fact that more people lived on this continent at the time than even in Europe is never even mentioned. The fact that the pilgrims brought with them infliction and betrayal and disease, that's never mentioned. I remember I had a boss who around Thanksgiving we had to work. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, and he said that us not working hard would be disrespectful to the day to the people that day was supposed to honor, the pilgrims. He said this to me and a couple other people, and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. That someone would actually suggest that that we're celebrating the pilgrims on Thanksgiving, or that we should work hard on behalf of them. It just blows my mind. But he said that even the forefathers of this nation, the framers of the Constitution, preferred Europeans, citing them as the primary immigrant to the New World, disregarding the fact that there were so many other people from so many other cultures and immigrants and nationalities stitching the fabric that has become America. And yet that history is marginalized or ignored altogether. If you talk about it, some say that you're woke. But in honesty, it's just things that we should be learning, and we don't learn these things. Do you know that women weren't allowed to vote until the 1920s? Did you remember that? Native Americans couldn't all vote until 1924. And though freed male slaves and non-white men were technically allowed to vote in 1870, Jim Crow and a complicit Supreme Court made sure that blacks in America wouldn't all be allowed to vote until 1965. Even today, literally today, I saw a story about Brian Kemp trying to suppress black votes, holding up voter registrations. Elections in just less than a month. Look at Bill Cosby. And look at Brett Kavanaugh. What's the difference? Then look at Brock Turner. What's the difference? What about Dylan Roof? He made it out alive. But what about Tamir Rice? How about in 2015 when I worked for that guy that I mentioned earlier? He was the CEO. He was my direct boss, but he was also the CEO, and he was a living archetype for a 50-year-old white man. He one time made an argument that millennials were too sensitive by citing a debate that he had with his daughter. He was confused when she said that he shouldn't refer to their Hispanic landscaper as the Mexican. And he said, well, what am I supposed to call him? He told me one time I was a credit to my race because I didn't leave my wife and my kids when I found out she was pregnant. Casually said that. And he feared the day that whites became the minority. He one time told me that as a white man in America, he had no rights. None. And what's crazy is that he wasn't only speaking for himself in those feelings. You see a connection? I honestly say this with trepidation, and I vacillated as to whether or not I should say it at all. But I think the time has come to say that there's a certain strain of white people that are fucking up this country. All right? I don't say that lightly. I, of course, don't mean all white persons. All right? I hate to be this guy, but my best friend is white. My wife is white. My children are half white. My son is white. Her whole family, obviously, is Caucasian. Most of my friends are white. I grew up on Long Island. I grew up predominantly around white people. I went to school at a Catholic school in Belmont, North Carolina. I don't hate white people. Okay, so when I posted that this episode was going to be called The Problem of Whiteness, someone immediately said, oh, so we're the problem of whiteness. We're the racists. No, I'm not racist. And I hate to even have to say this, but I'm not racist. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not racist. But there is a problem with the Anglo-Saxon, Judeo-Christian, patriarchal hierarchy that is controlling this country right now. Okay? This is a problem. Like, accused pedophile, let's take this for consideration, an actual creepy fuck, Roy Moore. He lost to Doug Jones in Alabama, which is historic, but only by 22,000 votes, and 40% of the population didn't even show up. He was accused of sexual assault by multiple women, who were as young as 14 at the time of the accused assault. He lost endorsements from Ted Cruz and Jeff Sessions, but 48% of the people in Alabama voted for him to represent them in Congress. Think about that. White college grads went for Roy Moore by a margin of 17%. Those without college degrees went by 55%. White women with degrees went for Roy Moore by 7%, and 91% of all Republicans voted for him. Oh, and 80% of all Christians went for Roy Moore. This is a man who was accused of sexually assaulting children. And the President of the United States never relented his support. In fact, supposedly to this day, he still asks why Roy Moore didn't win Alabama. Last year, a bunch of white supremacist goons gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, to protest the removal of a Confederate monument and throw up Nazi slogans. You will not replace us. You will not replace us. They had tiki torches and khakis and God. Then they killed someone. And the next day, the president said this.
When you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at, excuse me, what about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. Fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent.
If for a second you doubt that whiteness plays a factor into all of this, ask yourself this. Honestly, ask yourself this. If Barack Obama ever behaved like Donald Trump, would he have had a iota of a chance of becoming president? If Tamir Rice was named Tyler Rice and he was white, would he be alive today? If those ranchers who took the wildlife refuge in Oregon, if they were black, would they have made it out alive, or would they have been pardoned? And if at the same time those Native Americans were white people and the Keystone Pipeline was going through a church cemetery instead of Native American or Indian burial grounds, as they call it, would that have been a bigger problem? Ask yourself, would George Zimmerman have gotten off if he killed a white boy? Would Brock Turner have gotten off if he was black? Would we ever see white children separated from their families and thrown into cages? Ever? Would you ever see that? Would Brett Kavanaugh have been confirmed if he were a minority or a woman and he behaved the way he did? Or she behaved the way he did? Now, I know that some will argue that there are plenty of minorities and women who push the narrative. There are plenty. I've talked about Candace Owens on the show before. Her little followers who recite her bullshit. But you have to understand, even Susan Collins regurgitated the party lines to uphold the patriarchal status quo. And make no mistake, though, in order for ethnic superiority to be realized, you must have people of the oppressed people. You must have a few of the oppressed people on your side. They lull people like them into the false sense of security, and they lure them into the pit. I'm looking at you, Candace Owens. And even more so, and more heartbreakingly so, at you, Kanye.
You see, they laughing at me. You heard them, they scream at me. They bully me. They bullied me backstage. They said, don't go out there with that hat on. They bullied me backstage. They bullied me. And then they say, I'm in a sunken place. You want to see the sunken place? Okay, I'm going to listen to y'all now. Or I'm going to put my Superman cape on. Because this means you can't tell me what to do. Follow your heart and stop following your mind. That's how we're controlled. That's how we're programmed. If you want the world to move forward, try love. Thank y'all for giving me this platform. I know some of y'all don't agree, but y'all be going at that man neck a lot, and I don't think it's actually that helpful. I think the universe has balance. 90% of news are liberal. 90% of TV, LA, New York, writers, rappers, musicians. So it's easy to make it seem like it's so one-sided.
Now, don't get me wrong. Democrats don't have the best track record with minority issues, with immigrant issues, with the things that really affect black people. But you're fucking crazy if you think that jumping into the pit of fire that is the Republican Party is going to be better for you. That's like I really, Diet Coke's not that good for me. I'm going to drink this gasoline instead. Let's see how that goes. Are you fucking kidding me? What do you have to lose? And you have to listen to the dehumanizing language that they use too. Like Donald Trump literally compared immigrants to snakes. There's a reason that they do that. That's a tactic. If you dehumanize someone, it's easier to commit atrocities against them. Kanye West is necessary for the narrative that he's good for black people, that Donald Trump is good for black people. Candace Owens is necessary for that narrative, because if they can even just influence a few people to come on their side, that's how they build their majority. They're going to be black people, and there are black people out there who are like, oh, Democrats suck, Donald Trump, but there's nothing upon which to stand. They don't make their point based on any solid facts. And this is all to say that power is the most important to the structure. Okay, power is most important. Just ask Lindsey Graham.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham.
Specifically, again, that of the Anglo-Saxon Judeo-Christian patriarchal hierarchy. That's the status quo. And despite the anti-establishment persona put forth by Donald Trump, draining the swamp and all that bullshit, he is the embodiment of that power structure. He's like the final form of white supremacy. He's like Voltron made up of racial angst and hatred of women. To paraphrase a really wise man, white people be fucking up. I'll leave you on this. The structure has always been in place, but there are things we can do. Organize, antagonize, demonstrate, but most importantly, we have to vote. Okay? November 6th. Let's put dents in this machine until we can beat it down. And amplify the voice of the people. Bear in mind, again, the problem of whiteness doesn't mean all white people are like this. But if you see this behavior and you do nothing, if you understand the history of white supremacy in this country, and I could go on and on about it, but I wanted to keep this one brief because I don't have a guest. I'm going to play 2 songs for you. We'll get to that in a second. But if you see the history in this country, if you're okay with Nazis and Klan marching and killing people, if you don't say anything or do anything about that, then you're a coward. Even if you don't go and march down there with them, you're part of the problem. You have to understand that. All people, not just minorities, all people, they seek to subjugate everyone. They just use minorities to drive a wedge between us. That's the problem of whiteness. That's what it does. That's the whole thing it's always done. Irish people and Italian people weren't always considered white. When Irish people got over here and Italian people got over here, they treated them like shit. They treated them worse than black people at the time, worse than freed slaves in many cases. It wasn't until the white Anglo-Saxon power structure realized that when these forces come together, they could topple anything. And that's still true today. Okay? That's what they talk about. That's the People's Campaign. That's the Rainbow Coalition. That's the Poor People's Campaign. Those are the things. Those coalitions are built around the same idea. That's power to the people. That's why it's so important to vote November 6th, because the people are not represented in our power institutions. We're not represented in the halls of Congress. We're not represented in the White House. We're not represented on the Supreme Court. We're not represented on the state levels either. We are represented in prisons. We are represented in hospitals. We are represented in places like that. We are represented in poor schools, in poor circumstances. Obviously not always, but the power structure seeks to subvert and divide anyone who can challenge it, and the power has to go into the hands of the people. If we are ever to rise above this Anglo-Saxon, Judeo-Christian, patriarchal, hierarchical power structure, we have to unite as a people. Power to the people. They are not the people. Okay? They are not the people. We have to show them, not through violence, through rhetoric, and through voting. So November 6th, vote like your fucking life depends on it, because guess what? It just might. Okay, so look, this was a solo cast. So as with the last solo cast, I got 2 songs for you. I'm going to leave you on these 2 songs. They ain't got shit to do with what we talked about today, but that's okay. I'm going to leave you on a high note. One of those songs is a classic to me. It came out about 2015. It's by a Charlotte band called The Slow Motion Ride. The name of the song is The Heartbreak Song. And the second song is was just recently introduced to me. It's by a group called the Midnight Era Collective. And it's called Han Solo. And it's actually pretty dope. So enjoy the music and let's have a conversation. Please, if you like the show, share it. Tell your friends about what we're talking about. I want to spark up some conversation. That's the whole goal of this show. So let's see if we can do that. Comment, like, share, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. And hey, we're going to talk about some serious shit sometimes. So like I said before, if this made you uncomfortable, I hope so. That was the point. You're not supposed to be uncomfortable talking about shit like this. Let's have a conversation. Enjoy the music. We out the wild. Peace. Are true, I'm not saying they are, but they are. Well then it's all because of you.
with class or hit no pass. Don't believe me, then just watch and learn. I don't feel, don't ask, just please or ask. I could really be a bachelor. And when no kids don't spaz on it, I chaz, all the money shuts up on your mouth. It's a good day for cash and bad habit passion. Now you in the past tense. I only like when you're talking to pillar. Not a prayer running, catch a fella. Told you to bring 100 villas. Cut his little girl, acting some novellas. I don't wanna try love if I'm tangent. I'm like chance, way better independent. Sometimes I wanna go back to the band, though. Cause this bitch never hit it with a band's at. Ayy, Salah, dollar, make bread, my homie Han Salah. Ayy, holla, ballers, spread it out, baby, no butter. Salah, dollar, make bread, my homie Han Salah. Ayy, holla, ballers, spread it out, baby, no butter.
Hey, I remember dreaming about the big league, whoa. Now move on with the big things, no. Never could have been a better big three. I always still feeling, get some more green splurge. Spend a pain away like it's morphine, go. Get another rack, then I drag cream, go. Melting on my neck, vanilla ice cream, go. Melting on my neck, vanilla ice cream, ayy. Backwards do I say it like I'm Yoda. Florida boy hopping out Dakota. And I'm feeling colder, cause I jam my lyrics like it's soda. Making money sitting on the sofa. And I'm getting older, but I'm feeling bolder. New flows, big shows, feeling like the owner. Sitting on the game just like a roller coaster. Falling on them hard James Harden with the flutter. Hey, shut up, shut up. Don't roll your mouth, get cut up. Hey,
Salah, dollar, make bread, my homie Han Salah. Ayy, holla, ballers, spread it out, baby, no butter. Salah, dollar, make bread, my homie Han Salah. Ayy, holla, ballers, spread it out, baby, no butter.